Hello, people of the internet. I am Andres Perez, aka Kaiji Noir, and welcome to another episode of the Shuwatch podcast. Today we have Philadelphian indie comic writer Brandon Bitros here. I hope I pronounced that right, by the way.
You got it. You're good.
All right, awesome. So yes, we have Brandon Bitros here on the show to talk about his body of work when it comes to indie comics and what sort of projects he has in store for us in the near future. So, hey, Brandon, welcome to the show. I hope that things have been going well for you so far.
Good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It is great to have the writer of The Fist, a comic that I've reviewed last year, I believe, on my channel not too long ago. And it's, being a fan of your comic, I was really interested to get the chance to talk to you and see what sort of inspirations led to The Fist and see what sort of things that you have in store for us. So for those who may not be familiar, would you like to tell us or tell the audience a little bit about yourself and the work that you've done in terms of indie comics?
Well, I'm fairly new at it. I started it about 5 years ago. I always had a passion for writing, and it was something that I unfortunately didn't chase earlier in life. I was in the restaurant business for about 25 years. And then I decided to start writing comics about 5 years ago when I kind of just met up with some other creators and some artists. And it was just, I don't know, it was just something that I wanted to do. I started having children, which gave me, I wouldn't say it gave me free time, but it gave me more time at home to kind of focus on writing instead of, going out and partying and doing what young people do. And it kind of just went from there. I wanted to do film. I wanted to do comics. Wanted to do, plays, whatever. I'm not pigeonholed into any particular genre, or any particular medium. I just like writing in general. So, I started writing a satirical comic before The Fist called James versus the New World Order. And then kind of got this idea for The Fist, and I don't know, people seem to really like it, and it kind of took off from there.
I see then. And so what was the transition like from doing restaurant work, like as you mentioned, for 25 years, and then transitioning over into, entertainment and writing in general? What was that like? And have you always had an interest in entertainment and writing?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually started writing a comic with a friend of mine in high school, and it just never really went anywhere. He went off and became a tattoo artist, and I went my own direction, and we never really did anything with it. So I always had a passion for it, and I've always been a big, kind of a film nerd a little bit. I was a hardcore Punisher comics fan my whole life. It was something I was always really, really into. I just didn't have the work ethic, I think, earlier in life to really do it. And I was actually still in the business when I started writing comics.
The restaurant business?
Yes, I was still in the restaurant business when I started writing comics. And I don't know exactly what it was. It was just one of those things, like a light bulb went on and I decided, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. I think as I got a little bit older, I was, less fearful of what people would think of me. And I realized that, it doesn't really matter too much. I'll write for myself. If people like it, that's awesome. If they don't like it, who cares? I have nothing to lose. It wasn't like a rough transition. It was started as a hobby. It's still kind of a hobby that I would like to turn into something else in the future. So no, it wasn't. There was nothing crazy about the transition. I just kind of started doing it. I wish I had a more interesting answer for you.
No, definitely. I totally understand where you're coming from. I guess being an indie comic writer myself, who's very, very new to the field, I know exactly what the kind of things that you're going through in terms of doing something mainly as a hobby and doing stuff because you just happen to have a story within you that you just want to get out there regardless of what people feel. I can totally relate to the situation that you find yourself in. And I've always found indie writers to be incredibly inspirational because simply that, unlike say like a Marvel writer, a DC writer, they're just writing something for, I'm sure they're doing something for the passion as well, but it's mainly a professional job for them. It's like their means of getting a paycheck and putting food on the table. But it's like for indie writers, or for indie comic creators, it's like I always felt like the stories came solely from them. It's almost like they're telling a story that's incredibly personal to them. And when I was reading The Fist, I can definitely see that a lot of love and passion was put into that. And so I was very curious to know, how much of your real life experiences went into The Fist, and also by extension, James versus the New World Order.
Well, The Fist, yeah, it's there's a long story of how that comic kind of came about.
Okay.
Well, no, there's a lot of steps here. So at first, it really was just a very basic idea of, I'm in Philadelphia. We're very close to New York. New York gets a lot of attention.
Very true.
The big Marvel characters are all New York based, most of them. And I just, it was one of those things like, hey, you know what? I want to do a comic book set in Philadelphia. I want to do a Philadelphia-based, superhero, whatever it is, whatever kind of, the type of superhero wasn't really decided. The aesthetic wasn't really decided. It just started with that. And I was just kind of brainstorming names, and I didn't really have any ideas that I really wanted to run with. And I was actually bowling one day, and there was a bowling league competition, and I live in a neighborhood called Fishtown, which, as you probably know, was mentioned in The Fist. The protagonist Riley Reese is from Fishtown. So it's a real gritty working class neighborhood in Philadelphia with a rich history.
I see.
So, and it's where I've lived on and off for the past since 2001. So I'm at this bowling alley, and there's a team playing called the Fishtown Fists. And I just, like, a light bulb went off my head. I was like, The Fist. That's it. That's the name I'm going to go with. I'm going to name the character The Fist. And that was really the first step. I had nothing else mapped out besides that. So I had a name, and I had a very broad idea about a Philadelphia comic book, and that was it. Then I'm my other end. I'm into history, and I'm into, politics a little bit. And I was listening to a podcast on the first Red Scare, and it was the time period between World War I and the Great Depression, and what was going on in America at that time. And it was a very grim and dark time in the United States. World War I just ended, so there was just like chaos and hundreds of thousands of people dead, and social unrest was at an all-time high. Anti-immigration sentiment was at an all-time high. You had Italian immigrants that were hated, much like how Latino immigrants are hated today. So there was it was exactly 100 years ago too. Right. How bizarre is that?
Right.
And you had a lot of civil unrest. You had the biggest terrorist attack in the United States before 9/11 happened in 1918 or 1919.
Right.
And it was Italian anarchists that were being targeted for deportation, and they were fighting back by killing police officers and targeting judges and targeting politicians. So there was just all kinds of madness going on. And I just thought, wow, I mean, what a great setting for a comic book. I mean, it's perfect.
Yeah, it's very interesting because you don't really see that many period pieces focusing on this era of American history, with so much civil unrest, a lot of social chaos, a lot of political intrigue going around, and I guess I don't know if it's me, but whenever people tend to do like period pieces in like early 20th century, it always seems to be around like World War II based, like slightly before, during, or after that period, but never so much in like the direct aftermath of World War One, and that's what I find so unique about your work.
Well,
And
what's
mhm.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was also going to mention like the whole anti-immigration thing. I totally got that from issues 2 and 3, or at least with issue 3, I believe, when there's a bit of more kind of delves into that sort of what would you call animosity towards Chinese immigrants.
Right. And the you've read that the FBI, I mean, that's all real. I based that on a lot of real stuff. The FBI set up a lot of set up departments that were all about targeting immigrant communities,
Wow.
and they used espionage laws
Mm-hmm.
to target immigrants, saying that protesting was considered anti-American. You were basically a traitor. It was like you were working for the enemy.
Boy.
So they would use espionage laws to kind of circumvent the court system and just throw people out of the country.
Wow. I mean, if only they were to look at these days where there's like a new protest happening like every single month.
Right.
Yeah, it's a totally different world back then in the 1910s. Sorry, did you have a question?
No. I was just going to say, I think a lot of that time period gets overshadowed because I know when I was in school and I was in history, you kind of do World War One, then you jump to Prohibition,
right?
Great Depression, World War II, and there's these, these couple of years in between that were really crucial in the world, and for some reason, I don't remember learning about it in school.
Right,
and it was huge. The Soviet Union was formed. You had all these new kind of political ideas, whether it was communism and fascism, all coming, they were all reactionary to what happened at World War One.
Right.
And the political dynamics of Western countries was just changing. And it was very chaotic and very grim and dark, and there was a lot of human suffering going on. And I was like, this is just the perfect setting for a comic. And it really tied in. Philadelphia has a grim history and has a gritty history, and there was actually the terrorist attack that I spoke of earlier in 1919. One of them was in Philadelphia.
Oh wow! Okay, I am curious. Like, how did you go about researching a lot of this Philadelphian history in order to create the world for your comic?
So I actually found a guy, and I sorry I don't remember his name, but I found a gentleman who lives in my neighborhood who is actually a historian who specializes in Fishtown and Kensington. Kensington is the neighborhood right next to mine. He's from here, and he wrote a whole history book on the area. So I read his book, loved it. And kind of used that for inspiration, along with just kind of general history of the time period around the country, and kind of just combine the two.
Wow. Okay, then. And let's see. Were there other sorts of influences that led to the creation of the Fist and James versus the New World Order, be it from the comics medium or otherwise? Because I remember you mentioned that you were a big Punisher fan. I definitely see a lot of Punisher within the Fist itself.
Yeah, you have he is a vet. I kind of came up with this idea while I was writing it. Do you have to choose between the hero who has a moral code or the hero who's just screw it, I'm just gonna kill everyone, who's the Punisher? And I kind of tried to mesh those two a little bit, where you have a guy who is impulsive and reckless, kind of wants to be the moral code hero, but because of his background and because of his history and because of his impulses, he's not very good at it and he screws up a lot. And kind of accidentally crosses that line. that he doesn't want to cross, but it happens. So I kind of felt like I kind of took like, the tropes from Punisher and tropes from Batman and kind of combined them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of tried to make them like a combination of two of both of them, but like a real just working class guy from, Philadelphia.
Right. Yeah, I would say, yeah, you've definitely made him like a very relatable character. And so, what other sort of influences or what other sort of comics or other sorts of media or entertainment has sort of been like large influences for you that has helped shaped or molded your style of writing?
That's a hard question to answer, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm a fan of a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and they, whether it's, like I said, Punisher comics,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's, Breaking Bad,
Yeah, definitely.
right? Or it's, old gangster films. I draw from a lot of different places. This comic in particular it's a lot of it is mostly just influenced by my environment.
Okay.
I'm in a really tight knit working class community. When I write the dialogue, I'm channeling my neighbors.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
really, I'm channeling neighborhood guys that I talk to every day.
Right.
I'm not really pulling from, any kind of fictional influence as much as I'm really just pulling from my environment. I guess this is the best way I can answer it. I know you're a big noir head.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a noir comic, and I market it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it was just that by default. Like, what else could it be? I don't think I set out to say I'm going to do noir.
Uh-huh.
I think it just kind of, I don't know what else it could possibly be.
Like it was just like a natural fit for you, or a natural fit for this story.
Right, exactly. I was actually kind of intimidated by doing kind of the internal dialogue type writing. I'd never done that before.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a challenge. And, I like the way it came out. Like I said, I try not to model anyone else's work as much as I'm just channeling my environment. That's really the best way I could put it.
Mm-hmm.
It talks. It's funny when you in your review where you talked about the cursing.
Uh-huh.
That was like one of the few criticisms. And I laughed at that, and I was like, yeah, I could see it. I mean, you're not the first person to say that.
Well, I figure like if it was like meant to be natural and like people in Philadelphia really do talk like that, then I guess that kind of proves my criticism like invalid at that point, which I totally understand.
Yeah, I mean, the rhythm, the way that it's almost like when I hear the voices in my head and I'm writing it, if I were to take some of those curse words out, like the rhythm is just off.
Okay.
So there's a lot of, it's a tough city. Let's just put it that way. That's the way people talk here. So,
and I always hear stuff like, I don't know, the Bronx or New Jersey to be like much more like tough, rough and tough, gruff cities as opposed in comparison to Philadelphia. But like you said, it's like Philadelphia doesn't really get that much exposure in pop culture. I mean, personally, like when I think of like Philadelphia, I think like Rocky and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air,
right,
or
right.
Will Smith in general, I suppose.
Right. Well, I mean, okay. Well, Rocky, for instance, that's like my second favorite movie.
Okay.
So, making him a boxer, an underground fighter was no accident. It just works with Philly. It's a trope that is connected to Philadelphia and people know it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I felt that was a good direction to go. I don't mind that it would remind someone of Rocky for those reasons. So right. I don't know what else he would be, but and plus his name, the Fist. Obviously, he's got to be a fighter of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Just curious, like on a side tangent, how much of a cultural icon is Rocky to the real life Philadelphia?
Well, I'll tell you this. His statue, which is part of the art museum, is
Right,
a
I
huge
remember
tourist
that.
attraction.
Okay.
Uh, I'm a Uber driver
Mm-hmm.
part time, so I drive people to that constantly.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Even up to the
yeah,
Rocky Steps?
yeah, the Rocky Steps.
Ah.
It's funny because if you're from Philadelphia,
Mm-hmm.
you call it the art museum.
Right.
People who are tourists call it the Rocky Steps, like you just
I'm
did.
sorry.
No, it's cool. It's funny. Everybody does it. It's something that I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
They go, "We're going to the Rocky Steps," and if you're in Philly, it's the art museum. And also the gym where he trains, Mighty Mix,
Oh,
is
okay.
actually right. It's blocks from my house. I mean, that's all,
Oh, that's so
and that's
cool.
huge tourist attraction too. So it's a huge icon. It's huge here.
Wow, I remember like way back when there was like this is a popular internet great online YouTuber by the name of James Rolfe. His most famous claim to fame has been the Angry Video Game Nerd web series, and I remember he made this sort of like a small on web documentary where he actually travels to Philadelphia and goes to like all the real world locations from all the different movies, and
Oh,
like
that's
in fact, like maybe afterwards, I'll see if I can find that video and send it to you. But yeah, it's like the Rocky series has been very personal for me in my life. That's been like those have been a series of movies that my dad and I have bonded over, and yeah, those are a series of films I've never forgotten. And talking to someone who is from that city, I've always been curious to know like how big of a presence does Rocky have on that in Philadelphia?
Yeah, it's pretty huge. The movies are all filmed actually in my area in Fishtown, Kensington.
Mm,
In the movies, they're set in South Philly, as you know.
right.
So, I mean, I love them, and it's cool because every couple of years, Stallone's here with his movie crew doing something.
Mm-hmm.
He's always he pops up like it's funny. I mean, he pops up in his like Rocky gear and
Mm-hmm.
like walks through the museum sometimes and takes like Instagram videos. So it's big,
Oh
and it's
wow.
big enough. He's
Mm-hmm.
coming back, keeps taking them, and keeps hanging around. So
Right. He's
he's
almost like
big enough.
he's like an honorary Philadelphian, I suppose.
He really is. He is. Yeah. I mean, he gets like Philadelphia boos everybody when he's like shows up on a field at a sports game to like throw a pitch or something.
Mm-hmm.
He gets cheered every time.
Wow. He is almost
So,
like a local legend, a local hero.
and we have like the Rocky lookalike guy who walks around the neighborhood.
Oh, I didn't know that that's a thing.
Yeah, there's a guy who like hangs around where the gym is and where the pet shop is,
Mm-hmm.
which again is very close to where I live.
Uh-huh.
And he just like hangs around there, and tourists show up, and he's there to take pictures with them.
Oh wow, okay. I mean, I think the closest I can think of to that is like kind of like I'm reminded of in Hollywood Boulevard. There's always those people in costumes that they take pictures and get tips from people.
Right.
There was this one individual who looked like Christopher Reeves, and he goes up and looks like Superman, and he did that for like a good, I want to say like I don't know, 15, 20 years or so, and
Yeah.
he tragically passed away last year, I believe, or I think earlier this year, or I think late last year. I believe it was late last year. But that's like the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Um, I guess like going back to the comic, how did you ended up meeting your artist, Fernando Jimenez?
So it was really simple. I put an ad out on like Craigslist, I think. It was either Craigslist or Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, hey, I'm writing comic book scripts. I'm looking to put out some material, publish some comics, and if anybody's interested, hit me up. And he hit me up, and he drew some stuff, and I dug it, and we went from there.
Mm-hmm.
And he's somewhat local. He's in New Jersey. He's close to me, so we do like events together. And
Oh, that's great. I was going to ask if you guys have actually met in person.
oh yeah, we've met definitely. We've hung out a lot. He came up with the art concepts for the character,
Mm-hmm.
which I think are great. That was actually something I struggled with. I didn't have a look for. I couldn't come up with a look for him.
Mm-hmm.
He drew him with the eyes, and I was like, okay, that's it. It's memorable. It pops.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody remembers the eyes of the character.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worked out really well. So yeah, he came up with the fist logo, and he came up with the costume and everything.
Hmm. What was the inspiration behind the eyes? Like, what led to one being much bigger, one like a eye hole being like looking much bigger than the other?
Well, what's interesting about this is there was some reverse engineering going on here. Uh, we actually the art concept came first, and then the story came second.
Mm-hmm.
So he came up with a look, and then I came up with a story around it. It wasn't the other way around. I like the way it looked. So I have a story. It's incorporate. I mean, I guess I'm going to spoil it because I haven't actually uh, revealed why the costume looks that way
Right.
in the yet. Uh, but it was his mentor who if you read
Right.
all three issues
George?
it was George. Yes,
Okay.
his mentor, when he gets murdered, gets shot through the head,
Mm-hmm.
like through the eye, and when they
Ooh.
find his body, he's got like his broken up face looks like the Fisk mask.
Oh,
So
wow.
Riley bases the look like the reveal eventually is going to be that like he's kind of the ghost of George.
Right, right. Okay.
So that's where I went with it. But like I said, I didn't. Like I said, the look came first. It
Hmm.
was all reverse engineered.
Okay then, yeah. I like the appearance of the fist because it's like on one side of the face, it's like kind of like a Deadpool Spider-Man sort of style with like, the large eye hole, and meanwhile the other one's just a realistic small tiny dot for an eye. So just kind of like combining the two concepts together does prove to be a very unique and eye-catching visual. And I've noticed that in issue 3, you've changed artists from Fernando Jimenez to Brian Shickley. I hope I pronounced that right.
Yeah, yeah.
What led to the transition in artists?
It was actually just we were trying. I was just trying to kind of move things out a little bit faster.
Okay.
Fernando was working on some other things.
Mm-hmm.
So Shigley is actually my animator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he does the animated comics on YouTube, Blackstone Comics on YouTube. That's my channel. So I just kind of used him for that one. He drew it up. I dug it. So I don't know if he's gonna do more. I like his animation a lot, so
Oh,
he's been working
yeah.
on he's been working on that a lot. He's doing issue 2 right now. So and Fernando is doing issue 4 as we speak.
Oh, excellent then.
So I'm open to different artists interpreting this character in this world and kind of doing it different ways. Fernando. I'll always work with Fernando in some way.
Right.
But
Like with him providing the cover for issue 3.
well, right, it doesn't have to be him, right? Like
Uh-huh.
I want to use different artists. I love a lot of people's work, and I want to see what they can do with the character.
Okay then, yeah, and I really enjoy the art for that Brian Shickley provided for number 3 because I felt like it was definitely like the change was noticeable, but yet I feel like he honored the work that Jimenez brought to the table for the first 2 issues, where it's like it feels very natural. It doesn't feel like a drastic shift in styles. They kind of like sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, kind of issue 1's art kind of like just naturally blends into issue 3.
Yeah, and I like it too. I don't know if you picked up on it or not, but I kind of like the story kind of shifted a little bit. I kind of put some comedic stuff into it a little bit more, which is honestly, comedy writing is kind of my forte. I say that I do dark satire
Mm-hmm.
and transgressive fiction, and it's obviously the story is not a comedy, but I kind of like.
There's like a sense of like dark humor, twisted dark humor there, you mean?
yeah, like I kind of started to incorporate that a little bit more into the comic, kind of like drunken shenanigans. Him.
Yeah.
And I felt that Brian's art was definitely more complimentary to that.
I
Like
can
him,
see that. Uh-huh.
urinating outside the bar and like falling down and getting spooked by the rat that runs
Right,
by.
right. Or like, he just goes into a bar just in full costume and everyone's like, what the fuck is he doing?
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, like he's just walking around in his costume and lifts it up and he's taking a shot of whiskey. So yeah, that was a very comedic issue, and I definitely think it worked.
Oh
His
yeah,
art was
yeah.
complimentary. To that.
Yeah, definitely. I would say like the comedic elements definitely did worked at providing some like lighthearted like a momentary lighthearted distraction while at the same time not so much drastically shifting tones from like a lot
Right.
of the political intrigue and the violence and all that stuff going around with Fist and Cheese.
And
Uh-huh.
and as a writer, how this when your characters kind of once you develop them, they kind of write themselves in a way, and
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, yeah.
issue,
Once you develop a voice for them, you start thinking, what would they say in this situation, or is this really what they would the kind of thing they would say?
right. So it kind of like I just felt like the comedic element it felt very natural to the progression of the story. You're going to see more of it, and I like it because I think that he should be kind of a little goofy too. I mean, you're not talking about a super educated Batman-like character who can
Right.
go off to China and train with some secret society that's going to teach him how to be the biggest badass in the world and like a ninja, right?
Yeah.
We're talking a street fighter who's an alcoholic. It's going to be messy.
Right. He's kind of like a schlubby, like average Joe blue collar worker sort of dude.
Yeah, so he's gonna screw up, and it's got to be funny a little bit. I think
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Okay, and oh yeah, so you mentioned that you reached out to Jimenez through Craigslist or online. Was that the same thing? Like was that the same approach when you came across Brian Shickley? Like how did you come across him?
Yeah, it was very similar. It's almost hard to say because I kind of I network with so many different writers and artists online.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, if I see someone who is a fellow creator, I usually, automatically try to become friends with that person in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know exactly when we crossed paths. I believe we were talking for a little bit before he came onto the project.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was just looking at his Instagram page, and he had some kind of cool noir stuff on there.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked, and we just kind of agreed that he was going to do that issue. I think he just kind of fell into it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, once you've met enough artists, you would try to reach out to them and say, "Hey, do you want to get paid to do this?" And they'd probably be like, "Sure, I like money."
Yeah, exactly. And I dug his work. Like I said, he had some noir stuff online that I liked, so we did it.
Okay, and I'm assuming that this is how you met the rest of your the rest of your creative team, like your colorist, your letterer as well.
Yeah, I've actually switched around. I've gone through colorists and letterers more so than I have illustrators. I'm probably on my third colorist, I think.
Okay.
Second or third. So yeah. The colorist is a guy who has worked with Fernando for a while now, so they pretty much came as a team.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually had, believe it or not, I've had quite a few people drop off my projects.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I did anything wrong or I didn't pay people or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, some of my content makes people uncomfortable.
Sorry, the what of your content?
Some of my content makes people uncomfortable, and they don't like creating it.
Interesting.
Because I dive into some, I don't know. I mean, it's not a PG comic,
Definitely right. It's not for the weak. What would you say, like the weak-willed or the weak of minded?
Yeah, so I've had people not want to do it. Just be like, I'm not doing this comic. I don't want to attach my name to it. And I'm like, well, I'm not advocating for these horrible things that are in
Right,
the
right,
comic.
definitely not. It's like this is like you sort of set up like it's a cruel world, and you have characters who are trying to fight against all of that, who try to take a stand against all of that. It's like you don't, you don't. Well, what's the word, like condone it? It's sort of like it's a very interesting line right there. Now that I think about it, it's like, you want the violence, or you want the comic in general to be entertaining, but at the same time, you do want to say, yes, a lot of this is messed up.
Right. And then what's important is that the creator believe it. I don't believe it. Like saying that I don't advocate for it. I don't support it. The racism that's in the comic, the child abuse that's in the comic.
Right, right.
I think that's all horrible.
Yeah.
And but it's reality.
Right, right.
It exists in the world.
And sorry, I was going to say. Sorry, go ahead and finish.
Yeah, I was just going to say, these are all real things that happen in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And as a creator, I'm going to talk about it.
Right, right.
And
definitely.
I specifically chose that time period because it was so great and grim. So
yeah, and honestly, all of that makes for entertaining content.
I agree. If you're not invoking emotions from people, I don't know why you're in the game.
Right,
then it's just propaganda, as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to just please everyone and not upset anyone, I don't know what you're doing. But true, I'm not saying anything bad about these. They were all good guys, and they have their reasons, and I respect it. So
sure.
And the project moves on, so it's not a big deal.
Right, right. And let's see. So we mentioned sort of the steps that you took in order to get to creating the Fist. What were I'm very interested to know what were what was the process that led to James versus the New World Order? Because from what I've seen of it, it's definitely a very different take on your typical, I guess not so much typical, but it's like whenever you think of comic books in general, you generally think of superheroes and that sort of sci-fi or fantasy, that sort of stuff. But with James versus the New World Order, I got the sense that this was sort of like a sort of conspiracy action thriller, which I rarely see in comics. I see it a lot in movies, but not so much in comics. So what was the creative process that led to the creation of that comic, which I'm assuming that was your first comic, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And is that project currently ongoing, or has the Fist sort of taken over that spot?
It's still going. I have 25 issues of it written, and unlike Fist, it isn't going to be an ongoing series. It's going to be like a graphic novel. Excuse me. So once that's finished, it has a solid beginning and a solid end. I have it done. I have the end written and everything. So this comic book actually is the protagonist, James Contrell, is actually based on a real life friend of mine named James Mallory, who is a good friend of mine that I grew up with. And when I met him, he was living in the woods in a tent. He's he's a goofy survivalist type. Really great guy, really lovable guy. Like I said, he's a survivalist. He's into weapons. He builds weapons. He's into guns. He's he's a character. And growing up, we always kind of poked fun at him for that. And we used to always joke that if there was an apocalypse ever happened, we would all run to James.
Right.
And he would survive. He would know what to do. And I just kind of was like, that would be a funny comic book or a funny movie to write about him if there was an apocalypse. And I kind of just went from that and started writing. I wanted to write a story about him in the apocalypse. And then it kind of it started off just being straight satire, straight comedy, and kind of playing on conspiracy theories and kind of playing on, kind of right-wing paranoia. And then it kind of developed its own story, and then I pulled a story out of it. And it's still a comedy, it's still satire, but there's, a real story there. And again, it was one of those things that just kind of evolved over time. Once I started writing it, I started getting new ideas, and I started to like the characters more. And I don't know, went from there. And then now it's like a real hero's journey type of story.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I was very surprised that you didn't introduce the main hero until the second issue. And it wasn't until, like, I guess, issue 3 when you start to sort of see, like, the connections between the protagonist from issue 1 and issue 2. And I'm assuming, like, as the series goes on, their paths will eventually cross.
Yeah, I got some criticism for that, for not putting him in the first issue and kind of just doing this whole kind of subplot as the first issue that had nothing to do with, like the subplot and didn't really have anything to do with the main character. But it was one of those things as the creator who's looking at the long term and knows how the story ends. I wanted to keep it. I felt that it was really necessary.
Right.
You may not see it now, but I hope to God I finish I can put out all these issues eventually. Once the project is complete, I think people have a greater understanding of why I did it that way. I just wanted to introduce the threat in the first issue, and I wanted to show that that the trust, that the secret society that, is kind of orchestrating all these horrible things in the world can hide in plain sight. That they see your uncle or your cousin or your brother, right? And they can kill people. And that was kind of the opening issue and for the people listening who haven't read it, it's a man visiting who he says is his sister in a mental institution. And she's being portrayed as somebody who has delusions that he is this big evil guy who is coming to murder her, and he is working on behalf of the secret society called the Trust.
Kind of sort of like a Illuminati sort of organization, I'm assuming. Okay.
Right. An Illuminati type organization. And he shows up, and I portray him as kind of like this weak character who just seems like he's at his wit's end with his sister, and he's crying and he's upset because she's not getting better, and he put her in there and she's kind of wild and nuts, and he doesn't know what else to do. And he goes back and he sees her and he's pleading with her to come home to the family. And then he just kind of it's the script, to flip the script.
Right. Yeah. That sudden shift that leads to that oh shit moment.
Yeah, he reveals himself that he is exactly what she said he was, and there's this big gunfight. And I'm spoiling the comic, but that's okay. And that's how I. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, you mentioned before, like, it all kind of works out in the end once the audiences see the entire series from beginning to end. And I feel like, since you mentioned you were wanting to make this into a graphic novel, or you envisioned this more as a graphic novel as opposed to like a issue by issue story, I'm assuming that the whole entire the entire story would read better in one single read through as opposed to just looking at it chapter by chapter.
Yes, exactly. And that's actually exactly what I told people who were kind of like, when they received the first issue, they liked it, but they weren't happy that they weren't introduced to the main character. And I explained that to them. I was like, well, it's kind of meant to be read in one sitting.
Right.
I just don't have like 60 grand to, put out a 300-page comic book in one shot, it's something that's going to go, it's going to have to be a long process. But once it's done, yes, you won't even notice it, right? You read the first issue.
Yeah. It's like, I can't imagine reading like the first chapter of, say, Watchmen.
Exactly.
And I definitely look forward to that. And you mentioned that James versus the New World Order, you plan for it to be roughly 25 issues?
Yeah, I got 25 issues written.
Okay. And how long do you expect the Fist to run its course?
I want to write the Fist as long as I can. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, and I would be open to other people writing it as well. I mean, I created the character and I created the setting, and it's one of those things where I'll have my rules. Like you can't introduce somebody with X-ray vision,
right?
You know what I mean? But like, as long as you abide by the rules of the universe, I'm cool with. I would love to see other people write it.
Okay, all right, yeah, I can totally see that, wanting to make the Fist into like an ongoing story, or like an ongoing series, or an ongoing franchise per se. So we've talked about like how you got your team together for these projects, and from what I understand, you use crowdfunding, specifically Kickstarter, to fund each individual issue. Am I correct?
Yes, for the most part. I mean, I've used some of my own money as well, but yeah.
Okay, and what has that been like to rely on crowdfunding to help fund your projects? Because I've noticed this movement recently, where like a lot of other indie comic creators are resorting to crowdfunding to help fund their projects issue by issue. Like the last person I had on the Shuwatch podcast, Scott Schmidt, he also had a Kickstarter project for, I believe, both issues of his comic Final Streets. And so I've noticed it's like a very interesting direction for indie comic creators to be able to get their work out there, and to have it's sort of like this business model from what I've seen, where it's like you're appealing your projects to a niche audience, and that niche audience is essentially paying for what they want. As opposed to sort of being forced to look through all the mainstream comics and seeing mostly stuff that they're probably not interested in. So as an outsider, as someone who has yet to use crowdfunding, it seemed like a very interesting business model. So I'm very curious to know, what has this whole experience been for you personally?
It's very challenging, I will say that, and it's very competitive. And pretty much where I'm at is I kind of get funded by the skin of my teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very challenging. It it can be off-putting at times, because I get a lot of positive feedback on my work, which is great. But that doesn't necessarily translate into funding. You theoretically you think it should, right? Like, well, people like my work, so why wouldn't they put money towards it? But there's a process to it that is there's a code that is I think hard to solve. I do well with it. These guys that are fund like raising like $20,000. I don't know what they're doing. I've read their books. I've listened to their podcasts. I can't quite figure out what it is that they're doing, that they're getting so much exposure.
You think it's like a name/brand recognition?
I mean, from my understanding, the more time you put into preparation, the better off you're going to be. So my next strategy is to kind of extend that a little bit. Right now I've been doing like a month prep and then launching. And I'm just thinking about, extending that to 2 months maybe, and just doing more podcasts and just trying to reach out to more people before I actually launch, and try to get more people on board. And then when I finally launch, I have them all there,
Right.
That seems to be the one thing that everybody says, the common denominator that everybody successful says is why they are successful.
Okay, then. And so, from the conceptual stage to the final selling of the comic, is funding the biggest challenge or the biggest hurdle to overcome? Or are there other obstacles that are other challenges that present themselves during the creative process of making a comic for you?
For me, the biggest challenge is marketing and crowdfunding. Yeah, absolutely. Creatively, man, I mean, like, this is just like, it's my second nature, being creative. My dream is just to have somebody throw money at me and I can just create and not have to talk to anybody. I love talking to you. Like, that would be like my dream. Like, you go online and you talk to people and you put your face everywhere and you advertise it. Just like let me create it. I mean, I love creating.
Mm-hmm.
I have like I compare my laptop to Prince's vault, how he had all that music recorded.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's like, man, I have I have so many different stories and scripts written, just like rough drafts. I mean, I'm like a maniac. I have so much material. Like, I
Hmm.
don't have to write again for like the next like 20 years. I have so much
Wow.
stuff in pre-production.
So at
Um,
least it seems like you've got your back catalog all figured out too. It's like it's good. Like you kind of save yourself a lot of time by preparing everything in advance.
oh yeah, man, I have so much stuff, and it's like I getting it executed. Obviously, financial hurdles are hard.
Hmm.
So there's that, and just it's a very competitive world out there. There's a lot of, the internet age. It's great that we live in an age where middlemen are being removed, and the creators can put themselves out there, and you don't need distributors
Uh huh.
like you once did. It's wonderful, and I love that. But it also makes the market a lot more competitive.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can disappear so easily. You really have to be unique, and you really have to stick out.
Hmm.
And it's hard to do, And personally, I don't. I notice a lot of people that their methodology for sticking out is to be kind of how am I going to put it? Like kind of provocative on purpose. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Okay. To have like some more sort of like a yeah, it's difficult to find the right word for that, but it's like you definitely got to have a particular personality that stands out, for better or worse, I suppose.
Yeah, but I mean, like almost like being negative, like just being
Mm.
like really
Yeah.
provocative, making enemies, you
Okay.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that.
And I just like I can be outspoken and I say what I think, and
Hmm.
I don't have filters. However, it's not really in my nature to just like kind of poke the bear just for the
Right.
sake of. And I've noticed that it can get
Or
people a lot of
like shit talking essentially, or talking smack about, I don't know, potential competitors or rivals or whatever.
exactly.
Stir the
I
pot. Yeah.
I'm not comfortable behaving that way.
Right.
And if
Right.
it works with people, that's great. I just like, I have my opinions,
Hmm.
but I'm not about to like, I don't want to say like act like a jackass,
Hmm.
just to get attention or just like tell people what they want to hear. Does that make sense?
Oh
Like,
yeah, yeah. I
I,
can definitely imagine that.
I have political themes in my work.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
But I don't want to just like beat people over the head with it
Right.
just
Right.
to
Yeah.
get attention. And that makes it difficult because I feel like, sometimes it seems like an easy way out. It's kind of like craft a brand for yourself. Like,
Hmm.
hey, it's the controversial guy who tells people to fuck off all the time. And I love it. It's so funny,
Hmm.
Uh, I'm just not like that.
Right.
And I
Right.
don't know.
You definitely kind of want people to judge you based on your own work as opposed to judging you as a person.
Yes, I do. And unfortunately, everything I've read in marketing
Hmm.
says that, now in the internet age, people they want a personality, they want a brand,
Uh
they
huh.
want the creator to be a brand. And you see it everywhere. You see it
Yeah.
even with chefs, if you go to like, like I said, I was in the restaurant industry for
Hmm.
years. And now you have like these chefs that like all their Instagram pages are them like showing their tattoos and holding up a knife. And it's like, there's no pictures of your food.
Right. Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah, you tend to see more about they're pretty much like advertising their personal lives as if you're coming to see them as opposed to their line of work.
Right. And, I that works. It just does. It just works for whatever reason.
Yeah, maybe
It,
like on Instagram you should like take selfies of you at the gym. You're just like working out. It's like, yeah, this is what the comic book creator's life is.
yeah, I feel weird doing it.
Yeah.
I'm 42. I'm just like at an age I wasn't raised in the internet age. So I
Uh-huh.
don't. There's a part of me that like I'm curmudgeony old man that maybe just doesn't get it.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's just, so I guess like social media branding and crowdsourcing. I mean, it's difficult for me.
Uh-huh.
I have a small tribe. I have people who enjoy my work and buy my stuff and read my stuff and really enjoy it, and that's great. I'd like to grow that. I don't know. Is my pride? Am I too prideful?
No,
How?
I don't think so. It's just like, I can I know how you feel. It's like rarely do I ever like I don't feel like when I'm trying to market my comic, I don't really do any of that stuff where it's like I don't. Sure, I do have somewhat of an online presence as Kaiju Noir on YouTube, doing reviews and podcasts and such. But it's like whenever I advertise the comic, I just kind of like don't really say, "Hey, this is." Rarely do I kind of mention the YouTube stuff because I feel like I'm still just a small fish in a large giant pond. So it's like I'm mainly focused everything on the comic. And even on like Instagram or Facebook, anything that I kind of share about myself, it's mainly just sort of like, I don't know, vacation photos. That's the closest maybe, but it's all. I always try to keep it like the like quote unquote professional comic book life and like the sort of personal life. Like always kind of try to keep everything more separated as opposed to like putting them all together, trying to put everything together. I mean, I guess like because I've already built myself a following as Kaiju Noir, that like a lot of my followers who follow me on YouTube have gone over to support my comic, and so there is that association. Like I like this YouTube personality, so I'm going to associate that with this giant robot comic, but I don't really push it any further than that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I get it.
Yeah, and
it is.
Uh-huh.
Be yourself, right? That's what they say.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Not somebody who, is going to be overly provocative just for the sake of it.
Right, yeah. I definitely don't want to make enemies with other people, especially not indie creators. I have nothing but the utmost respect for indie creators such as yourself, and so it's like I would rather make connections with indie creators as opposed to starting any sort of feud or create any bad blood between any of them. That's yeah. So it's like the idea of being so provocative to the point where you're just sort of like you're calling people out and trying to discredit them for their work. It's like, no, I that's like the last thing I want to do, honestly.
Yeah, but it's like it's frustrating because it works. I mean, you look at these Comics Gates guys.
Mm-hmm.
And, like their whole brand is like, we hate liberals and they're ruining Star Wars and they're ruining comics. And it's ridiculous.
What's the thing that they say? Yeah, trigger the libs or you gotta own the libs.
Right? And like the things that they're saying about the medium, it's totally ridiculous. I mean, it's like, okay, they're good. Like the way I look at it is they're good comics, they're bad comics.
Mm-hmm.
They're good political comics, they're bad political comics.
Right.
Politics and comics as a principle isn't bad,
no,
right? I mean, it's art. Like anything goes. Like it's self-expression. If you're expressing yourself politically and in your art, that's great. If you're expressing yourself about like your love of food, that's great too, right? And so the things that they say are ridiculous. Are there like crappy comics out there that are like politically driven propaganda from like a kind of progressive outlook? Of course there are. I mean, I can agree with the message and still think it's a kind of a crappy story, and I don't really enjoy it. But, they can't just say that, right? They got to make it like it's a conspiracy against them. Like, they're ruining everything. And you know what they do when they talk like that? They raise like $1 million.
I mean, like, like the more what's called sensationalized they make their the way they like the more sensational they make their message, the more views it attracts, essentially.
Right.
And
I just
sorry, go ahead.
I just don't have the stomach for that kind of stuff. Like I could, like you're gonna go start a fight with a bunch of people just to get attention. So like it drives traffic to your page, and then like people who agree with you are fighting with the people who are arguing with you, and then I don't know, you become like a martyr to one side and become hated by the other side, and it's
I'm definitely not about that life.
No, man, I'm just not. I got like
Yeah,
kids.
I just want to. I'm sure, like you, I just want to live my life, make my comics, and enjoy the whole thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't mind pissing people off. I mean, if they get pissed off by something I wrote, that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. I'm not upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I'm not going to just like overdo it. I don't know.
Right.
Like I said, it's a formula that some reason it works. It's just not me.
Right. And
Just,
I just like to add to what you just said. The idea of like politics and comics. Like I always felt like comics is art. Art is a reflection of life, and life is filled with has been filled with a lot of political turmoil, and this can go all the way back to I don't know, World War II propaganda style comics, or if you want to talk about like the X-Men being an allegory for racism back in the 60s, or you want to talk about like such influential works like Watchmen or The Dark Knight Returns, which take not so subtle jabs at all at the current political climate of the time. But yeah, I always felt like, in terms, I have no issue with people inserting their own political beliefs in comics. I've always personally felt like story should come first, and it's like there's that chance, like you mentioned, you can have interesting political commentary, but then have a crap story. And for me personally, like if I don't care about your story, then I don't care about the whatever political message you want. And then, yeah, it's always that balance of, it's like you want to tell a good story with a good message. Or if you focus too much on the message, you'll have a bad story. Or, if you try and make it so shoving a message, any sort of message down someone's throat, that's going to be very off-putting for audiences and readers. And yeah, it's like I have no issue with how you approach a story, just as long as the execution itself is good. And I guess, but then again, that's also going to be very subjective from person to person.
exactly. And personally, like if I see something that is, if I'm a reader and I feel like I'm being talked to like I'm stupid, like they're
Right.
overselling the message,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm being talked down to. Like I feel like, all right, no, I get it. Like I'm smart enough. I think I'm smart enough
Mm-hmm.
that I can understand what you're trying to say. You don't have to oversell it. That always bothers me. And I think that's kind of weak storytelling, personally, even if I agree with the message. So I automatically get turned off by that. Also, I feel like, I've read stuff that I just feel like is corporate pandering, right? Like, representation is great.
Right.
Everyone should, I'm all about representation. I'm all about different groups having their own heroes and having, that's all wonderful.
Yeah, and it's also like it's a very satisfying feeling to see something that you can relate to in some way, shape, or form on the pages or on the big screen or anywhere.
But sometimes you read something and you're like, this is a pretty like the story is pretty dead. I mean, there's nothing going on here. It just feels like corporate is pandering, right?
Right,
like
right. They're so focused on the end game or the end goal of having a character that fits a certain demographic that they didn't bother to put any effort in the story behind that character.
Right, exactly, and it's just kind of like it's weak. I don't really dig it.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to be open minded, and if it makes somebody happy, then cool.
More power to them.
Whatever happened to like read it or don't read it?
Right. Yeah.
Like if you don't like it, you don't have to read it. That's it.
Right. Yeah. Although I kind of feel like I don't know. This is a topic I also wanted to talk about in terms of like the current climate when it comes to comics, because like mainstream comics it's been reported, people have discussed this, that mainstream comics have been on the decline for a good long while. And so anytime that, readers kind of drop comics or readers stop supporting comics, is it me or does it feel like readers are sort of like blamed or made out to be the bad guy for not supporting comics or causing the decline of comics? What's your take on that?
Well, I'm going to say this. I've gotten some flack for it in the past. I think that there is so much great content out there.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't think that there's again, going back to the Comicsgate guys,
Mm-hmm.
their buzz term is, the state of comics. Comics are so bad right now. That's why nobody's buying them. And I'm like, you know what? You're not fucking buying them either. Because I'll tell you what, there's so much good stuff out there. You just got to dig for it. Here's the problem,
Mm-hmm.
I think, is that you have some people that don't want to venture outside of, the mainstream. Right?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Like, if you're just reading Marvel and you're just reading DC, okay, you're screwed. You're not going to find something you like. But
Right.
there's so much good stuff out there. So much
Yeah.
of it. Like, I mean, I have my Comixology subscription.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my library is so backed up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have so much stuff I'm just waiting to read.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of it is good. I'll tell you what, I'm a film buff. I love
Mm-hmm.
television. I love all storytelling mediums, right?
Mm-hmm.
Comics are one of the few mediums where I can randomly pick something up and really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't get on Amazon Prime
Mm-hmm.
and randomly pick a movie or a show and go, wow, that was great. That rarely happens.
Okay.
Like, for me to watch something,
Mm-hmm.
to actually watch something, I gotta hear about it first. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I need to hear, like, critics and friends
Mm-hmm.
like really sell it to me before I'm gonna sit down and watch a whole series.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But
Yeah.
like comics, indie comics especially, like I can literally just like take my finger, close my eyes, point to something, and read it and really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And not regret
it. It is possible that, Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, and I was just gonna say it's very much like punk rock, in that respect. It's one of the few art mediums left where there is kind of like an underground, and like you can, it's like back in the day when you used to go to the record store and you just like find, I just remember being a kid and being into like metal and punk and weird music and just like finding a CD or a tape that had a cool cover up
Mm-hmm.
and being like, wow, I really dig this cover. I'm going to go listen to this. And it was awesome, right? But, the digital age, it's not really around anymore.
Uh-huh.
And in comics, it's kind of like that. I will pick something out because I like the way it looks. I'll be like, that looks cool. I like the lettering. I like the artwork on the front. I'm going to read this.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 times out of 10, I really like it.
Yeah, definitely. I would say like, yeah, the indie comics market, the indie comic market is definitely a very, almost like a treasure trove, just because you have so many people who are sort of free from the restrictions of big time mainstream publishers like Marvel and DC and whatnot, and they're just free to make whatever story they want. And like, I like, given how I always feel like indie comics are some of the most passion fueled projects I've come across, simply because I feel like a lot of these people, as much as it would, I don't know, I could be wrong here, but I always got the feeling that a lot of these people that are creating something simply for the sake of creating something, because, comics are not as profitable as, say, movies or television or novels. But so for these people to make something, I feel like they're making it simply for the sake of making art, making something they believe in, as opposed to, doing it solely for the money or whatnot.
Right, exactly.
And that's what leads to some like very interesting pieces of media that's out there waiting to be discovered outside of the main two, Marvel and DC. But unfortunately, they're so dominant, it's very difficult to really find for people to get a hold of the indie comics, unless, like you said, they got to go out of their way for that. And I'm not sure if that's a problem for the audience, or if that's a problem for the readers, or if that's a problem of the industry as a whole being so dominated by two main companies in terms of like the public spotlight.
Yeah, I think that it's, to go back to what I said before, I think that there's a lot of people who are kind of full of crap about like being readers. They want to get mad at something, and they want to blame, they don't like the direction Thor is going in, so they get mad. But they're like, don't stop reading Thor then, and read this other thing that's really awesome. They're not adventurous people, right? Like these Comicsgate guys, to go back to them, like the problem is they're their own problem. I mean, I can't speak for everyone who complains about the state of comics, but I know that group. They're their own problem. They're not adventurous. They want Thor to like be cool and they want like bigger tits in DC. They don't like that they made the tits smaller on some character or something stupid, right? They're not adventurous readers. That's their problem. Adventurous readers will find stuff to read.
Mm-hmm.
And then the decline of comics could also be due to in the mainstream could be due to the fact that there's so much media now. I mean, you have how many Marvel movies are there? There's Netflix.
Oh God, I can't even count them all.
There's Hulu.
Yeah.
I mean, you have so many choices now. I mean, honestly, I mean, we love to read comics, but you know, when you have all this other stuff, and you have YouTube shows that you can watch, all this stuff that you can watch, why even bother? I mean,
so it's like you don't need to go to comics to get some Iron Man content. You can go literally anywhere else to get your Iron Man fix.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, even people that do read, they want like the best representation of the comic on film, right? Like, I love this comic. I want somebody to make this really awesome movie out of it. And it's like, well, why don't you just enjoy the comic? Just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah. Do you? Because there have been reports that there's potential rumors that DC or Marvel may or may not be shutting down production on new comics. Maybe perhaps if one day the owners like Warner Brothers, AT&T, Marvel, or Disney, they might decide, hey, maybe it's not so profitable anymore to make new comics, and instead we should just, sell old comics and just rely on that IP we already have enough source material to make movies and TV shows and books and whatever toys for decades on end. Do you ever see that as a possibility of Marvel and DC potentially kind of like ending production on new comics, or do you think they are still gonna survive? Because I guess personally for me, I always feel like indie comics at least there's always going to be an indie market. But I can't say for sure whether or not DC and Marvel can continue to last.
I mean, I don't really follow what goes on with Marvel and DC too much. I haven't been into any of their products in God knows how long. I mean, the last thing I read, I think, was like the Punisher Max series, and I know they kind of brought it back. I haven't really gotten back into it, so I don't really follow much of the drama. All I know is like what I see on social media. But I mean, if it's not profitable for them, I guess, I mean, they're kind of putting themselves out of business, I'm sure, in that, I mean, they're making their own products obsolete, right? By doing all these shows.
Yeah. And I guess not to mention like they're sort of, I've often heard people mention that they kind of do like what's the word? Like overcrowding the market, oversaturating the market, perhaps putting out too many comics at the same time and not giving enough marketing for all of them. So it's like a lot of them sort of get ignored because Marvel refuses to, or doesn't, or Marvel or DC fails to advertise any of it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But I suppose they could do it, but I don't. Or maybe just like you said, they'll just stop oversaturating and tightening it up a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Marvel like? Do they instill like new rules where like the comics kind of have to like play into the movies a little bit, or is that
That's been a big thing for a long while now. I mean, I could have sworn there was a point in time where it's like Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch were no longer mutants because the MCU versions were not mutants. And I know there are cases where certain characters are made to look like the actors that portray them in the films, whether it's like their physical appearance or just their costumes. I remember way back when in the Spider-Man comics, when the Sam Raimi trilogy was getting popular, they made Spider-Man have organic webs, and they gave him the black costume around the same time Spider-Man 3 came out.
Right.
Yeah, but that's definitely been a thing for a good long while now, just sort of pandering to the MCU people, the MCU crowd. Although from what I understand, that hasn't helped them in their sales in the slightest. It's like they're trying to bring in the movie people to read the comics, but movie people generally don't, from what I understand, don't read the comics in the end.
Yeah,
So
I
it's like
mean,
they're
I know it's like,
it's like they're pandering to an audience that just isn't there, or just they're trying to pander to them, but it just never works. It seems.
yeah, I don't think it will ever work. I mean, it's like even if you just from the indie standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
like I always use like because I was in the restaurant industry before, as I told you,
Mm-hmm.
and I always use beer as a metaphor for like the comic book world. Like if you make your own beer,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
You like something's like, hey, I love beer. I'm a huge beer fan, and you're like, oh, really? I make my own beer. That beer person is going to buy your beer.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, really? That's great. I want to try your beer. I'll buy it. Comic books are not like that. This universe is nothing like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like people can love Iron Man, right? They can go see all the Iron Man movies, read the comic, but sell it like million, like make the Avengers movie like the biggest money grossing movie of all time, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like they love that shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
These people. If you're like, hey, I write comics, why don't you check it out? They're like, no, I don't have no interest in that at all.
Right.
Like, I'm not saying like they're bad. I'm just saying it's just the way it is,
Right,
like,
right. They're just people who kind of prefer to sit down and watch something as opposed to just sitting down and reading something. It's a whole different. Or I guess there's even like when you compare books to comics to novels. There's always going to be those people who prefer to read, and they kind of see comics as just something that's inferior for whatever reason.
But even people who do read comics, like they're into like the thing that they're into.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're into like the characters that they're into, the story arcs that they're into, and they're not looking to really like branch out. A lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's just something I've noticed. I mean, I would chalk it up to saying like maybe my product isn't good and people just aren't interested in it, but my reviews are always really good. Like sometimes I wish my reviews were really bad, so I have an excuse for like not selling as much product as I would like to.
It's the reviews.
Shit on this, please. Like, stop saying it's good. Stop telling me that I'm good.
And just stop telling me nice things.
Because like I'm not selling it, and I want to sell it. And like if you just said I sucked, then I would just go do something else. But you're all just like, oh, this is really great. I love it. And the thing is, I know this industry. Like people don't lie. Like no one's going to tell you your stuff is good if it sucks. Like they don't care about your feelings at all. Like comic book fans, and they will shit on your product with like no one will ever do. Like they will make you feel terrible. Like kill yourself. Your shit is horrible. They don't care. So if they tell you they like it, they're telling you the truth. I know that. Like random. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Finish your thoughts.
No, I was just gonna finish on that. Like, random people writing, Facebook comments and YouTube comments, and writing me emails or whatever, or doing reviews like you did. I mean, they're not gonna lie. They don't know me. They're not my family members. They have no reason to like tell me that my stuff is good, right? So I try to believe them, and I'm like, all right. Well, I got something good going here. I got something people enjoy. How can I get it out there more? And it's again goes back to the branding and the social media and the advertising.
Right. It's a one. You're essentially a one-man marketing team right now.
Right. I just it's like I know just from the reactions that I've got that if I get my work into people's eyes. That they like it. Like if I could just get people to check it out,
right?
Just into it. But that's the hardest part. It's just to get people to check it.
Yeah. And you just got to keep on promoting it, keep on pimping it out, just gotta keep shoving it into everyone's faces until they know that it's a thing that exists at that moment.
And it's like, I promise you'll probably like it. I mean, most people tend to like it. They'll dig it. But it's it's a challenge.
And I'm assuming that like you are never going to sign up with a publisher, and you would prefer to do things the self-publish route, or would you like to eventually in the future partner up with a publisher, or whether
I would.
You would?
If Image wanted to put out the Fist, I would do it.
Okay then. Cool. And let's see. I guess to switch gears, I'm very interested. I'm very curious to know what led to your style of distribution in terms of the sort of pay what you want model for your comics.
It really just came down to kind of removing financial barriers and just getting the product out there. I just realized that, if I'm ever going to get an audience, I have to give stuff away. That's why I got into animation, into the motion comics. My biggest priority right now is just to get people to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to make money off it at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I want people to see it. I want to share it with people within reason. And I think sometimes you just got to do that. So I chose to pay what you want because it's like I kind of want to just say to people like, here, I'm not going to charge you for checking it out, but you like it, send me some money maybe so you can see more.
Right. Kind of essentially creating sort of like a tip jar, an online tip jar, essentially.
Yeah, and I know how it is. I don't disparage anybody. I'm not entitled to anybody's. I'm not entitled to an audience, right? Nobody is. And I've probably passed over so many things. There's so much media out there. I mean, even think about it. Hundreds of thousands of things I probably passed over. I'm like, I'm not checking that out. I'm not checking that out, right? Like things come and go in your social media universe that you don't know. It's hard. It's really hard to get it out there. It doesn't mean that it's not good stuff. It's just our market is saturated.
No, that's very true.
I'm very grateful that people respond to it the way that they do. And that brings me joy. I sometimes suffer from imposter syndrome. I started this later in life. I decided to become a writer. In my late 30s, which is relatively late. I didn't pursue it early on, and I was nervous. I always had that voice in my head that I don't have any talent. You know what I mean? That I'm not good. That I'm just putting crap out there. Why am I doing this? So I the positive feedback is very rewarding to me. And if I can ever make a career in writing, that would be awesome. If I don't, I'm happy that people have enjoyed my work.
Right. That's definitely like the kind of almost like the most rewarding kind of feeling for me personally, where it's like when someone says you did a good job, it kind of feels like, yes, this whole venture was worth it. Just to entertain someone. You set out to entertain someone, and god damn it, you just did that. You accomplished it.
Right. And, I feel like, I like the Fist, especially, I don't know. There's something, like, I feel like it's a story that needs to be told. Like we were talking about earlier about kind of like this dark time in American history that gets overlooked that was so important in a lot of ways. It really shaped the future of America and the world. And a lot of human suffering was going on then, and people coming home from war really fucked up. I got this character, he's got PTSD, he's got an alcohol problem, he's used.
Yeah, and it's almost like you can start to make like sort of parallels between during this period in American history and right now, whether it's political turmoil, veterans, PTSD-riddled veterans, hostility towards people, towards foreigners, a lot of that stuff, or like people struggling to make ends meet. It's a very relatable world that you've crafted in this comic that I feel like, that can draw many people in. And the fact that it's all drawn from real world history just makes it all the more fascinating, I think.
Well, yeah, it was a lot of it was accidental. I mean, believe it or not, I'm conscious of the parallels between, the time period and now. But when I actually started writing it pre-Trump, when no one thought that this guy was ever going to be president.
Right.
And it was really mainly just focused on the time period.
Mm-hmm.
And then Trump happened, and it was just like, wow, I mean, this is like the parallels now are like way more apparent. Just like you look at like the statistics in America right now with like men, and just how like men of a certain age, how fucked up they are, and the drug addiction and the suicide rates in this country. Like white men are specifically over the age of 45 are like the only group in the United States that the mortality rates are on decline.
Oh, really?
And it's really bizarre. And a lot of it has to do with, I guess, like outsourcing of jobs, and I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of explanations, but it's really, I think, the root of what is so fucked up in America right now. It's creating this like white male rage that gave us Trump. And I kind of wanted to like comment on that a little bit in the Fist with like these guys coming home. I want them to be, they're horrible, and they're a lot of these guys, they're villains, right? They're doing things, and they're racist, and they're bigoted, but
there's like a story behind that.
Well, I mean, these guys are coming home from World War One. They're devastated. Their cities are their home is devastated, and they feel like that there's other people coming to their country that are getting a break that they're not getting, so they're angry.
Right.
And then I haven't gotten to Norman Pierce yet. The villain, this guy who owns a weapons manufacturing company, and he comes into Philadelphia, and he's hiring people to build him weapons, and making people police officers. He's militarizing the police, and then that your kind of your villain side. And then you have Riley Reese, who comes home, is in a similar situation, but kind of decides to because he has this moral compass that was instilled in him by the George character.
Yeah.
He has that struggle, right? Like, I kind of give him that struggle. Like, is he going to do the right thing and fight for justice? Or is he going to kind of join, what he's used to and what he knows?
Right.
He knows.
Give in to the dark side that's been festering inside of him.
Like, I wanted to kind of give this impression, like, these guys that he's fighting, these villains, like, these are guys that he knows, right? Like, these are guys in his neighborhood. These aren't like some villains from far away. These are like his neighbors. And he's, they don't suspect him because he's normally one of them. I wanted to portray that in the final scene where he's yelling at his neighbor for talking poorly about the police officer who got killed.
In issue 1, right?
In issue 1, right? Like, he's kind of, and he kind of still believes it a little bit. Like, it's not all fake. Like, it's the struggle. He drinks, and then he's the guilt. He's completely driven by guilt. Like, he doesn't feel right about it. So then, how does he express that? He goes out and he like beats people up. Right. Very unhealthy, very unhealthy way to express it.
Right. Right. Of course, like we said, we don't endorse this behavior. And the last thing I wanted to bring up was the webcomic itself. What made you interested in venturing off and adapting your Fist comic into a webcomic? And how has the process been like? I know like it was funded on Kickstarter, and eventually, it came out wonderfully, I must add, on, your YouTube channel. So it's like, what led to you wanting to do it, and what was the process like? I always, like I said before, I love television, I love animation, I love film, and when Brian, he suggested it to me, because he does animation. He's like, oh, do you want to do a motion comic? And I was like, are you kidding? Yes. Like, it just was a no-brainer. I was like, yeah, I want to do that.
it's something that sticks out. No one else is. I don't know any other indie creators that are doing motion comics.
Right? Yeah. I can't even think of any off the top of my head.
So I was just like, all right, here's a way to like get it out there. People can they can just watch it. They don't even have to sit down and read it. They can just watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think cinematically when I write.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of comic book creators, when they write their comics, they see the pages. I see movement.
I can attest to that.
Yeah, like I see it as a movie in my head,
mm-hmm.
and then I leave it up to the illustrator to translate that into a comic book.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt that doing it animated would really capture the aesthetic more. The sound, I want Philly to feel like desolate and grim. And I felt like the sound of the wind and like, you really felt the cold.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's cold and it's, he walks outside the bar and he's freezing. Like I just feel it captures the story better with the sound, the voice, and it just was a no-brainer to me. I think that the story in an animated medium where you can hear it just works better.
Mm-hmm.
That's not taking away from. I mean, I love comics. Mm-hmm. It's just the way my brain works. It's the way my creative process is. I see it that way.
Right. Yeah. And what?
I mean, how about what did you think? Did you enjoy it better as a read, or did you enjoy watching it better?
I feel like. It's kind of funny because, like, when I read your comic, it's like watching, a classic noir film, and watching the motion comic, it's like this feels like this is sort of the story that was going on in my head as I was reading the comic. So it almost feels like it was naturally made to be in a audible, motion fueled medium. So
okay.
So it's like it was like a perfect match for the motion comic format. And if it was made into like a full blown animated project, it's like that would feel like even more of a natural next step.
Well, that's good then, because then you're hearing the things in your head that I want you to hear. And the actor, I mean, the voice. Mm-hmm. Was almost to what I heard in my head when I was writing it,
Right. Yeah, it came out just so natural. And, that's where I feel like, oh, yeah, even with all the cursing, it's like, this feels like natural dialogue now that I'm hearing it out loud.
Right. I mean, like I said, I channel neighborhood guys. Like, I hear, like, guys I talk to every day when I was, like, writing the dialogue for all of the Philly accent is a difficult accent to pull off. Mm-hmm. So it's, the accent's not perfect. Uh-huh. It's not, the actors are great. They're not from here. Uh-huh. But I mean, even the Rocky films, they don't do they do New York accents. I mean, nobody does the Philly accents in anything. So it's like, it's fine.
Yeah. How would you describe the Philly accent?
It's like a little bit. It's similar to the Baltimore one. It's kind of like I have it a little bit. Mm-hmm. I could do it more. It's like, yo, boss. Like they talk like that.
Okay.
And yo, you gotta like say words like that. Yeah, I'm gonna use the phone. That's how they talk.
Okay.
But nobody who like, unless you live in Philly, you don't know that.
Right.
Like it's. The way that we're portrayed in media is always like just kind of a generic East Coast accent.
Like your Boston accent, your Brooklyn accent, that sort of stuff, that sort of deal.
Yeah, it's like a combination of all. Like for example, I always make fun of this movie. Did you ever see the movie Warrior?
Warrior, no. Sorry, I know the Warriors, but not Warrior. Sorry.
Just Warrior. They're like Pittsburgh in that. It's about like mixed martial artists, and it's Tom Hardy is one of the stars in it.
Oh, okay.
And they're supposed to be in Pennsylvania. One of the characters lives in New York. Lives in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. So the story takes place between like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. But like Tom Hardy, who's a fantastic actor,
yeah,
but he does just like he talks like he's from New York. And
Mm-hmm.
I just laugh at it. Just like, you're not in New York. He just does like this generic East Coast accent.
Yeah.
He's like, you get the fuck out of here. You would take your stupid fucking hat and get the fuck out of here. That's how he talks in it. And
Uh-huh.
it's like, that's how nobody talks like that around here.
Right,
Like,
right.
it's totally. And even in the Rocky films, Tyler Shire, she's like, she talks like she's from New York in it, but she's like supposed to be from Kensington. And it's like,
Mm.
nobody likes that. It's totally wrong.
Right, right.
But I coach these actors
Okay.
on it, and they do it. They do it well. It's not perfect, but it's I would say compared to everything, it's like one of the best renditions. So
Uh-huh.
relatively, it's
Okay.
but it's not. But nobody will do it perfect. No one
Uh-huh.
will.
And what has it been like, sort of like becoming this director for this project? I'm assuming this is sort of like your first venture into this sort of directorial position.
Yeah. I mean, it's been. I honestly, I mean, the people that I found
Mm-hmm.
are good at what they do. So they don't need like a whole lot of direction. I mean, the voice actors are great.
Mm-hmm.
I give pretty much just like a summary of what I want, and they
Uh-huh.
usually pull it to like it was only like a couple of takes
Mm-hmm.
for the motion comic, and it came out great. I kind of just gave Brian like a kind of like a structural script, like how I want this to be like a cold opening, and here's how I want the intro to be, and here are
Mm-hmm.
the sounds that I want.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the aesthetic that I'm going for, like I want it to windy, I want you to feel the cold.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, I haven't been too rigid with it. Like they're good at what they do,
Right.
so I pretty much just give them like a foundation to work from, and
Okay.
I'm happy.
All right. And where did you manage to get the voice actors and the composer as well? Because I know like Brian, he did the animation, but as for everyone else, how did you find them?
So the voice actors I found, I just put a thing on Facebook like I'm looking for voice actors, and like right away
Mm-hmm.
somebody tagged him in it, and we talked, and I listened to some of his work, and he's a professional voice actor,
Oh, cool.
and he's awesome, and he has a woman that he works with, and that was it. We hit it off, and he does it, and he's I sent him the comic, and he liked it. He's like, "Oh, this is really good. I want to do this," and that was it. He wanted to do it, and I
Awesome.
went from there. It's like literally like the first person I talked to.
Right. Okay then. And I'm saying like as for everyone else in the cast, what did you send? Like you sent out like a casting call on social media, and you kind of got responses from them.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
okay. And okay then. So for the future of Blackstone Comics, what sort of projects do you have in the pipeworks right now?
So interestingly enough, Blackstone Comics is going to be venturing into film.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm doing a YouTube series that I'm writing and I'm starring in. Talk about taking risks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be acting and writing. I acted in high school,
Mm-hmm.
which was the 1890s, I think. It was a long time ago. Uh, so, uh, so that was a very long time ago. But I'm going to be doing that again. As I mentioned earlier, I drive for Uber and Lyft part time,
mm-hmm.
and I'm going to be doing a show about an Uber driver
Mm-hmm.
and about his interactions in the car with passengers. So
Mm-hmm.
each episode will be a different passenger, and it'll be like Taxi Cab Confessions meets Twilight Zone.
Ooh, okay.
Weird interactions, like they're fictional,
Mm-hmm.
loosely based on some real interactions that I've had, but they're 90% fictional.
Mm-hmm.
Written by me, and I'm going to be the driver in it. And I wrote the scripts, and I'm trying. We haven't really started. We're starting in the spring. I don't know how it's going to work out, but I'm attempting to do improv. I'm attempting to do kind of like a Curb Your Enthusiasm style of script writing,
Mm-hmm.
where I kind of just give initiation of where I want the conversation to go, and then the actors will kind of just make it up as we go with just like a few lines scripted here and there. I've never done this before, so I don't know how that will work. We'll see. If it doesn't work, then I'll just write every word of it. But as for now, that's what I'm going to try to do. Because I kind of want to go for, are you familiar with like mumblecore and like that genre of film?
Right.
Very natural dialogue, you know? I want it to feel like two people that are just like, I don't want it to feel scripted, right? I want it to feel like actually watching a conversation in an Uber car during a ride. So they'll just be kind of like character descriptions and what the conversation is going to be about. And then it's just going to go from there. Okay. And the show is going to shut up and drive.
Oh, okay then. Yeah. You got me sold already, man.
And it's going to be noir. It'll be black and white.
Okay.
And it's going to be a dark comedy.
All right then.
A dark dramedy, maybe. I have some serious things that I'm going to put in there. Interweave in it with the character, with the main character, who's me, whose name is going to be Sydney in it.
Okay.
And we start shooting in the spring.
Oh, wow. Okay, then. And when do you expect audiences to see the release of the first episode?
So, like I said, this is all new territory for me, so I don't know how long it's going to take. From what I understand, we're going to do... Each episode is going to be probably about 7 to 15 minutes. And according to the gentleman I'm working with, the people that I'm working with, that's going to be about a couple 4 hours of filming per episode, probably. So I'm gonna try to put out like 5 at a time.
Okay then.
So I don't want to just.
Sorry.
No, I'm gonna. So I mean, like I don't really know exactly how we're gonna do it. I'm gonna try to put out. I'm going to try to have like, let's put it this way. I'm going to try to have like 5 of them complete before I start putting it out, and then maybe like release quickly on the channel. I haven't quite decided yet, but that's probably the route I'm going to
go. All right then. And in terms of other projects, I understand that roughly as of the time of this, hopefully around the time this podcast is released on YouTube, you would be having an ongoing Kickstarter for the Fists, for a motion comic adaptation of the Fist #2. And so, what are the plans for that?
That should be done. Fist #2 might be out as early as next week.
Okay.
It's he's doing it right now. The voice acting is complete. So yeah, that should. I think next week should be done.
Oh wow! Okay then.
I'm gonna hit up Brian tomorrow and see where he's at, like how much he needs. But he's been working on it for a good couple days now, so he should be done. And as soon as it's done, I'm gonna upload it and I'll be there.
Awesome. And then, when can people expect to see the Fist #3 as well?
I'm gonna go right into it. It's basically gonna come down to like when they can work. Like I said, the comics are.
I mean the comic, not the motion comic.
Oh, the actual comic. Okay, well,
yeah.
3's finished.
Yeah.
3 I've out now already. The actual comic is done.
Yes.
So you're talking about 4?
Oh, okay. Yeah. 4? Sorry, I meant to say. Yeah, I meant to say like the latest issue that's going to come out because. I checked the Blackstone Comics website. I don't think I saw 3 on there, so I assume that it wasn't released yet.
I do have it. It's done.
Oh, okay.
I don't have it up on that site yet, but it is finished. 4 is going to hopefully be done by the spring. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna take my time with the Kickstarter issue because I just want to make sure I get funded. I don't want to I want to ask for an ambitious number and not shortchange myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give myself a nice amount of time to prep. So probably like 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
But Fernando has started illustrating it.
Awesome.
And I'm editing the script now. The plots, the scene structure is done,
Mm-hmm.
is finished to the point where he can illustrate it while I'm editing, because I'm just kind of cleaning up the dialogue and the monologue and stuff like that. It's like pretty horrid right now. I opened up my laptop the other day to edit it, and I was like, oosh, this is not good at all. It's a mess.
Uh-huh.
It's a big mess. But it'll be good once it's finished. So I'm in the process of cleaning all that up
Mm-hmm.
and tightening it up, and that should be out hopefully by late spring, I would say.
Oh, excellent then. And let's see, are there any other works or any other things that we could be looking forward to in the future, whether it's Fist related or just Blackstone or just anything from you personally?
I like I said, I have so much stuff. I have so many comic book scripts.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I don't want to wear myself too thin. So I got the show coming up, which I'm really excited about. I'm super passionate about this project. I'm terrified to do it because I've been on camera and acting. I mean, it's something I haven't done in a long time. But I'm excited. I think it's something I can do. So there's that, and then just the James versus the New World Order comics and the Fist. I'm just going to narrow it down to those three things.
All right, yeah, definitely. We're definitely smart to take things, one step at a time and not try to do everything at once. Then, I
want to get back on board with James versus the New World Order. It's the Fist is much more popular. But it's funny because I'm not going to say I like the James versus the New World Order one more, because I don't like it more, but I like it for different reasons. It's more of a mind bender. It's trippy. It's psychedelic. It's like I have a lot more freedom with it to write. It's goofier, so I can kind of just be a little loose with it, and there's a lot of creative freedom with that project. And it's absurdist. It has a lot of elements to it that are a lot of fun to do. And so I do look forward to getting back into that. And I'm hoping I can really capture an audience with it once the ball starts rolling with it, because I really like the project. And it gets overshadowed by my other project a lot. But people will enjoy it if they kind of think outside the box a little bit and dive into it.
Right, excellent then. And do you happen to have any convention appearances planned for this year?
I don't have anything planned yet. I usually do them every year, but I'm taking my family to London this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I'm a huge Back to the Future nerd, and the whole Back to the Future cast is actually going to be at the convention in DC.
Okay.
So I'm not going to get a table there, but I kind of I've always said I would never spend a ton of money to meet celebrities ever. Always no way I would ever do that. But Doc and Marty, I don't know, man. I have to shell out some dough for that one.
Right.
Until I do the question and answer session, that's that's huge. I have to do it. And my daughter is a huge fan of Christina Ricci, and she's going to be there.
Oh, wow.
And it's literally on her birthday.
Aww.
So that's going to cost a pretty penny to go do all that. So, my summer is getting eaten up fast between taking my kids to Europe and doing this. I'm hoping that I'm going to try to do Keystone Comic Con in Philly in August.
Okay.
But I haven't signed up yet.
All right, then. And let's see, I guess my final question for this podcast, since we are nearing the 2-hour mark, if you can give any sort of advice to any other aspiring creators out there, what would it be?
Ooh, all right. That's a good question. Let me think here. I would say, does that have to be any sort of any just like writing in general or comic books in general, like specific?
In general, yeah, just being someone who wants to make art and put it out there for the masses to see.
I would say write for yourself, because you are an audience member for other works of art, and if you like your work, other people will like your work. So don't necessarily cater to yourself. Art is individual self-expression. In my opinion, art is not utilitarian. Write for yourself. You are your own audience, and just have faith that there are other people out there like you who like the same things you like. And if you like your stuff, other people will like your stuff. That's just what I've found.
Mm-hmm.
I don't cater to anyone specific except for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that it resonates with other people. And, it does. It's a formula that seems to work. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Excellent.
You are your own audience. You are your main audience.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brandon. And
thank you.
And thank you very much for taking the time to be on the show. Listening to you and reading your comic and seeing how much how far you've come. It's been it's truly an inspiration. And I just feel I'm just so glad to get the honor to get the chance to sit down and chat with you for these last couple hours. And I just hope for nothing but the best for you and all of your creative ventures.
Oh, thank you, man. Your review made my day, that made my week, my year. That review was great. I thank you for that.
You're
and
welcome,
I know you're wrong.
I'm just saying what I felt, man.
Yeah. But yeah, it meant a lot. I know that it wasn't a favor because we don't really know each other all that well.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really cool to listen to. I listened to it probably 10 times.
Oh wow. I just enjoy supporting, indie works whenever I can. And when I read your book, I was like, you know what? Other people need to know about this. I got to let the world know.
Great, man. I appreciate it a lot.
Excellent. And so thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for checking out the latest episode of the Shuwatch podcast. I have been Andres Perez, a.k.a. Kaj Noir, and you have been, my good sir?
Brandon Bitros.
And, if people wish to follow you and your body of work, where can people find you?
So Blackstone Comics on YouTube is probably your best bet. You can see the Fist motion comic there. Episode 2 will be coming out soon. And my show, Shut Up and Drive, will be on there. So check that out and subscribe. Also, I'm on Instagram, Brandon Blackstone Comics. That's a decent place to check me out. You can see mirror selfies along with pages from comic books, drunken mirror selfies. Also, Blackstone Comics is on Facebook. So you can check us out there. I have a Blackstone Comics page. And you can add me as a friend if you'd like. Brandon Bitros on Facebook. If you can stomach my hysterical rantings from time to time, we can be friends. And we can chat movies and comics and whatever else you want to talk about.
Excellent.
All right, thank you.
And I'll be sure to leave all the links in the description below for this video. Thank you very much, everybody, once again, for joining me for this episode. And again, a big thanks to Brandon for being here on the show. Be sure to tune in next time. You can always follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, all that good stuff. Be sure to check out this guy's comics, both The Fist and James vs. the New World Order. So until next time, everybody, take care.